Hello everyone. Welcome to another Tuesday night patron-only Eventide stream. Hi there, I am Jason Bullman. I am looking forward to chatting with all of you today a bit. It's a little bit of a story day, a little bit of an update, maybe a little bit of exciting news. We'll see how things kind of progress here. Last week we obviously didn't end up having our stream because of intense heat, and hopefully that was kind of the last of it here in Seattle. So I'm hoping things get back to normal. Sorry about missing a stream. I don't like to do that, but you know, my office gets really gross and warm in the late afternoon. That said, it's pretty nice in here today. So we're gonna go ahead and chat about the current status of the second part of Wolfren's. So I've got two playtest groups. They're both working their way through this. We've had a little stutter stops here throughout the summer months. It's always a little tricky getting everyone to be in attendance and you know, make sure that they are ready to play. And to top it off, we got major conventions happening and folks are out for that. So you know, it's been a struggle and continues to be a struggle, to be honest. I'm going to be missing someone in this coming Thursday's game, and then next week I'm supposed to have a game on Monday, but I have to move it, and I'm going to have to chat with my players about moving it because two of my players are not going to be there. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, no, don't even get me started. The Southwest is getting cooked right now. I feel for you. The heat this past 2 months has been pretty intense up here in Seattle. It's not much compared to other places, but nobody has air conditioning, so it's pretty rough. Anyway, So, we did manage to get in playtest sessions last week. I even got one in after the heat wave. I delayed the start to allow things to cool down a bit, and got in a session last week because I wanted to continue making progress. Like, it is one of the biggest challenges to me is that this adventure can't proceed without the playtesting. Because I've been using this playtesting to refine the adventure, right? As I get to a location and my players interact with it, they might do things I didn't expect. They might you know, interact with NPCs in ways that I didn't really account for. And generally what will happen is, in the moment, I'll ad-lib something, right? I'll just make something up. And there's been a handful of times where I've made something up and I'll write notes in the document that's like, hey, solve this problem. And sometimes I'll come back and be like, yeah, I need to change that. Like, I've already had to change names of a number of NPCs, and I just here today changed the name of a business because things are too close to one another or it causes some confusion. Little bits of playtesting notes like that are really important. Some of that is happening as I am going along. Eventually my writing will outpace the playtesting. I mean, it already is, but I'm getting closer and closer to actually finishing off the writing of part 2. In which case I'll get to the point where I lay it out and give it to all of you. I'm hoping that that is later this month. That's my current goal. That said, part 1, the big news is part 1 is nearly through editing. Which means I will be able to take that to its next stage, which is layout, copy fit, and then I plan on doing printer proofing to get these in a format that folks can get print on demand. If they want a print copy of the first part of Wolfren's Fate, it'll be a 32-page adventure. It's just a fun little dungeon crawl. Probably going to be a little pricey, but for all of you who are patrons, it's going to be deeply discounted. So that should be fun. I'm looking forward to that. I may even do a limited run of where I print a bunch, have them shipped to me. I'll sign them, and they'll be the first 10 actual print copies of anything Eventide ever made. So that could be kind of interesting, and those will go first come, first serve to probably the highest tier first, and we'll work our way down. So we'll figure that out. I don't know just yet, but I need to kind of get it back. There's a whole bunch of steps coming, but until I get it back from the editor, I'm kind of stuck. And it's running really late right now, and my editor feels real bad about it. There's just been a chain of problems. None of them are his fault. So I feel bad, but you know, here we are. So let's get to talking about Wolfren's Fate Part 2. Now, as I've talked about in some of our previous chats, the groups are making their way through the mystery. So this mystery is one in which you as a GM will need to keep good track of time. time is an important part in part 2, because as they go and explore things, they burn time of the day. They cannot solve the entire mystery in one day. There are too many things that need to be done. You have to travel all over the place to get things done. That is quite intentional. In fact, I doubt the players can actually solve it in even 2 days, because some of these places are businesses and they just close. So it may come out that the players have to try and solve some of these things during the Eventide celebration, which is the 3 days after the 2 days the players have at the start. So the players get 2 days to do some investigation, then the Eventide celebration hits. And during the celebration, a lot of these businesses are open significantly less. So it'll become even more challenging. The goal here, by the way, isn't to make it kind of a bureaucratic nightmare. It's to make it so that the end of the mystery coincides with kind of the last day of the Eventide Festival. That's the goal. That's the thing you're trying to finesse as a GM. And the module can't mandate it. The best it can do is kind of give you the tools to kind of manipulate and adjust things to get it to land where you want it to. Not impossible, but it does require some work. So my players are now almost, both groups are now at the end of the first day. Just about. One group's a little further along than the other, in terms of time spent. So it starts on the 27th of Octran, which is the second to last day of Octran. And after Octran is the 3-day Festival of Eventide. So they have the 27th, the 28th, and then the 3 days of Eventide. And that's important because during the 3 days of Eventide is when the Gaunts move against the player characters directly, and they get drawn into the sewers and find the Gaunt lair and all the kind of stuff that leads to the finale of part 2. So they're basically deep in the mystery, and the thing that my players have caught on to is that they've really latched onto the fact that this part is there to kind of expand their understanding of the world, of the city, of its politics, of its people, right? So the first part of this adventure is really there just to get the players to know themselves, right? There's so much stuff to learn that asking them to learn everything about a brand new setting and learn their new characters all simultaneously, in my experience, it just doesn't work. So the adventure is there to be kind of a self-contained box that the players can run around in and learn a bit about themselves, learn how their characters work, figure out kind of the basics, get some things dropped, but not make them critical yet. And then when we get to part 2, those things start getting reinforced and layered. I talked about this in one of our secrets of Eventide chats about layering in the lore. Or maybe that wasn't a secrets chat. I don't remember. I get these things mixed up. So now that they're kind of deep into it, right, they're starting to go to all of the various locations and investigate, they're trying to track down Wolfren's ring. So that leads them to a lot of different places, right? In their first sessions, both of them ended up going to the Remembering Stone. I've got some thoughts about that, because one of the groups started their second session there and had more development. Both groups are kind of wandering from place to place, but they're both going to different places. So I'm getting a lot of feedback on the entire kind of first part of this very quickly, because I got one group going there, then another group going there, which does mean that I can kind of refine it between each one, and truly get kind of 2 separate passes on some of this material, which is good, because frankly, building a mystery is one of the hardest things you can do as an RPG writer, because it's real easy for the players to miss something or skip a part or use their powers and abilities to bypass parts of the adventure. So that's a bit of a challenge. Can put you in a bit of a pickle. So I'm just going to kind of launch into some of the various plot points in part 2 and talk about kind of what I've learned, how the groups have interacted with them, if both have, if only one has, and what I've learned from there. So if you remember, the script and plot line of this is that there's a whole bunch of different locations they can visit, and they're basically trying to track down any hint, any sign of Wolfren's ring. And the way that the path of this goes is that the true path of the mystery is to visit the Remembering Stone, which is where Wolfren's name is on a stone covered in elven names. And from that, realize that someone put it there. And the keeper of the stone remembers that it was someone who worked at the Skygaze Inn. But this was hundreds of years ago, and the keeper was a little girl. She is also elven, and didn't get details and doesn't remember much. So they can go to the Skygaze Inn and learn that the Skygaze Inn had a member of the waitstaff who, according to the current owner's mother, was infatuated or possibly in a relationship with Wolfren, and that she retired about 100 years ago. She's elven, and that she may still live. That can lead them out to kind of getting into the real meat of it, which is going out to meet this woman. And she mentions that she did indeed go to Wolfren's tower after the collapse because she was so distraught. And she dug through the rubble and she found the ring. So she had it, but no longer has it anymore because about a few years later, Wolfren's brother came to town looking to collect any of Wolfren's belongings. And he collected them from her, but she does not know where he lives, but she does know his name. Once they have his name, they can go back to the House of Law, where they can look up the brother and determine that the brother does not live in Wormbone, has never lived in Wormbone, however, was in Wormbone and put a contract, a legal contract in order with a publisher, basically working on a book, and the book was a book on horticulture. This can then lead them to the Teetering Tower, where they can find the book, but they can only find the book after they help unsort or resort the library, after they deal with the gloamling that is helping the bookkeeper. Then they can get the book and realize that the book talks about the plants around the area of Red Thistle, because that's where he lived. So at that point in time, they know that the ring is in Red Thistle. That's the track of the mystery. That's how they actually solve it. But if you don't go to these places in order, they can seem like a red herring. So one of the groups has gone to the Teetering Tower and gotten distracted by all the strange magic items and things that are in there. And frankly, spent about half of the last session just dealing with weird magic items and looking at odd books in there. They found one of Wolfren's old books, but they didn't find the brother's book because the brother's last name is not Wolfren. In fact, Wolfren is kind of a moniker, was the wizard's first name. He has a last name, but no one in town knows it because he didn't tell it to anyone. It wasn't, being a wizard, you kind of adopt a name, and that's what you just go by. Problem is, it wasn't his last name. So the family's last name is what they're really trying to look for. And once they have that, then they can find the book from the brother. But they went there without that knowledge. So in fact, they feel like the Teetering Tower was a red herring. And in fact, for them right at the moment, it is. There's nothing there that they can really learn until they know the last name. Then they can come back and find the book that they're actually looking for, which solves the whole mystery. Right? So instead, they went and kind of got lost in looking at the weird magic items, because it's got weird magic items in it. The Teetering Tower is a curio shop. It has things that aren't like obvious magic items of power. It's not like you go there to buy swords. That's not what they have. They have a cracked crystal ball that shows you what happened in the room 10 minutes ago. Not super useful, but there might be a situation in the future where it's incredibly handy, but not right now. Some of this is me just laying down a scattering of thoughts and ideas that later the players might go, aha, we need that. Can we go borrow that, right? And use it to solve some other mystery. Maybe even in a different adventure, right? There's a bunch of finger bones chained to a pillar on one floor of the Teetering Tower that whenever a lie is spoken in its presence, they twitch. It does not, it does this, but doesn't have anything to do with this adventure right now. It's just weird things in the Teetering Tower because, again, the Teetering Tower looks like a red herring right now. So they've, I had one group go to the Teetering Tower. That same group actually went to the tea shop as well, which technically doesn't have any direct clue either. It does have an indirect clue that will make sense if the groups discover it, but it's not critical to the mystery. So if you go to the tea shop, which was called Blackleaf, I think I'm changing the name to Greenleaf. The Greenleaf tea shop has teas from all around the world and records of the shipments that Wolfren used to get in. We used to get more than just tea shipped there, though, because in addition with the tea, we get correspondence and books and things like that. And there's a handful of packages that were sent to Wolfren, but then held for redelivery to someone else. And what they are is they're packages Wolfren got and then had reshipped to Red Thistle, but there's no record of it. But they were botanical specimens. So it's a clue that later on you will end up making sense. But right now it doesn't mean anything at all. So, you know, some of this is there to kind of add texture to Wolfren, right? You know, in part one, Wolfren's kind of this mythical figure. And that's fine for part one, but at the end of part one, when you realize Wolfren might be alive, that's the point where, story-wise, I start layering into Wolfren as a person. Because, honestly, you can't learn as much from a ruin about a person as you can from the people who knew him or you know, records of what he did to and with other people, right? The entire point of this is to kind of add more breadth to Wolfren's story. He had someone he was in love with. He had shops that he frequented. He's becoming more of a three-dimensional character, and this is before you even meet him, which is, I think, kind of a fun way to introduce him as a real person, because he's becoming more and more concrete and less of a mythical tower wizard, right? You know, which is kind of a cliche. Which is my whole goal here, is to take that cliche and claim it and make it something else. He's still a wizard. He still lives in a tower, but he's more of a rounded individual that has drives and motivations and cares and fears and all sorts of things that make him a more interesting character. So, you know, the red herrings right now are looming large in people's minds in some cases, right? You know, one of my groups thinks that the dragon came to town for Wolfren, and that the dragon is the elf that he was in love with. And he was in love with a dragon. That's where they've gone. That's not what's happening. Nor is it going to be what's happening. In fact, the dragon came to town, secret, and this is not even really revealed in the adventure. Wolfren will be able to figure this out once he learns what happened. But the dragon came because it sensed the powerful magic here, and it was dying. It was dying because of a lack of magic. That's why the dragon came to town. It came to town to try and feast on Wolfren's magic, because it was running out. And unfortunately, it died before it could get at the magic that it felt like it needed to sustain itself. So that's why the dragon came. The dragon came because it was hungry. Yeah. Now, there's a question in chat of, will Wolfren be kind of a don't meet your heroes kind of person? I don't think so. I think Wolfren is actually going to be kind of a complicated character. He's driven. He desperately wants to get at the kind of mystery behind everything. And frankly, when he comes back, he's going to be terribly melancholy because he's lost 300 years. Because he thought he had more time and now he doesn't. And I don't mean that in his lifespan. I mean in him trying to solve this grand mystery of what's happening. So, there's that. One thing I found interesting is that both groups have now visited the Stargaze Inn, because the Remembering Stone leads you to the Stargaze Inn, right? When you go to the Remembering Stone, you talk to the keeper there, and she tells you this story about how this woman came and petitioned the then keeper, to add Wolfren's name to the stone, because she could no longer see his name in the stars, and she worked in some place where stargazing was important. Now, the current keeper doesn't really visit. Wormbone doesn't know about the Skygaze Inn, but the players do. So that is a hint that, you know, they should go visit the Skygaze Inn, and both groups now have. And I gotta say, both groups have mucked it up pretty bad. They'll get through, but their kind of natural proclivity. The thing I've got going on with both of my groups is that both of my groups, to some extent, have a distrust of all NPCs. Like they're guarded. They don't want anyone to know their secrets. They're almost paranoid. I'm and it's not the whole groups. It's just like one or two folks. They don't trust characters they've just met, and in this case, they both groups have gone there. One went kind of during the lunch service, and one went closer to the dinner service. Yeah, and it's a case of player characters being player characters, absolutely. So the ones that went at lunch were worried they couldn't afford the place. This is the nicest, one of the nicest restaurants in town, and it is expensive, but they do have cheaper fare. And you know, you can go there and get, you know, a light lunch and the drink. It'll cost you twice as much as you pay anywhere else, but it's not going to cost you all the money you have. Now, my player characters are still pretty coin poor, so they're being especially cautious, which, you know, makes sense. But they kind of tried at first to dine and dash, and this is before they knew they needed to go here. So they thought the place was inconsequential, and then ended up, fortunately, didn't dine and dash. Someone in the group did pay for the lunch, which was good, because then when they did have to come back, it wasn't as thieves who stole lunch. That nearly happened. The other group shows up at dinner, where there is, you know, some nobles who have taken the high table, and starts throwing their weight around trying to get a better table. And they're doing this just because they want it, not because it actually furthers their story. They just need to talk to the staff about the person who worked here a long time ago. But instead get kind of obsessed with this status symbol. And so, like, both groups went to this place, and because it's a high-end restaurant, and they view themselves as kind of homeless malcontents, both groups kind of mess with this place, but they need something out of it. So it's kind of been interesting watching them navigate it. Makes me wonder if I should soften the approach of the place. I don't know. It's been weird watching both groups kind of approach it with kind of an adversarial bent to their interaction. So in some cases, both groups have had to kind of swallow their own misgivings or misconceptions to actually open up and talk to the staff. And you know, they've both made a bunch of skill checks, and they smoothed it over, but it took a surprising amount of effort to get things kind of in line and going. You know, it's been funny how that has been, frankly, kind of a challenge. You know, both groups managed to pull it off, and both groups got to the puzzle, because ultimately what you're trying to do there is you're trying to look at the innkeeper's mother's journals, which are kept in an old vault downstairs. And the innkeeper can never remember the combination, but every time she's solved it, she's solved it by using some clues, some old clues that are written on the wall next to it. And it's not the code, because otherwise anybody could open it, but it's things like these 4 digits, because it's like four dials with numbers 1 to 0 or 0 to 9, and no number is used twice. And there's things like, oh, here's this number 7532, and next to it is scrawled, none of these are correct, whereas the one above it is like 8419 or whatever, and it's like one of these is correct and in the correct position, right? So it's one of those types of logic math puzzles. Again, I'm a sucker for a good puzzle, and I like throwing interesting puzzles into my adventures, because I honestly think they're a fun break in the action. They kind of allow folks to, you know, frankly, they allow some folks who don't want to participate in the puzzle to go get a beverage. They allow folks who are good at puzzles a chance to kind of flex. You know, and as GM, I put plenty of stuff in there that's just like, yeah, if your players are not having a fun time, you can skip this. You can have them make some skill checks and stuff. Or give them hints, right? But fortunately, both of my groups have folks who like puzzles, so you know, not that big of a deal. So the other big thing that the players are starting to interact with, which is something that isn't really present at all in part 1, although I am laying the seeds for it in part 1, is the politics in Wormbone, because this is something that is going to be very important to their adventuring careers. As adventurers, I think it is important, you know, if your players are going to be based in one place, having the players get dragged into the politics of the place pretty early is important. Like, even if they're not regarded as much, it is useful to get them introduced to it, because as they become more powerful, it doesn't make a lot of sense from a narrative sense that the local government wouldn't pay attention to, right? You know, as they get more and more powerful, they become a resource, they become an asset, they become something, frankly, that most of the local political figures will learn that they need to manipulate. That starts very early here, because the players are also kind of local celebs now in a small way because of their exploration of the tower. So, you know, neither group has visited Lord Trevere yet. Both are kind of apprehensive for doing so. That is because both groups have a character in them that is on the outs with the local nobles. Both groups have one of these, and it's entirely by chance that each group has one character that's like, yeah, no, I'm not here to deal with the nobles. They know too much about me. In fact, one group has two characters that are to some degree on the outs with the local noble scene. However, House Trevere is very interested in getting to know them and kind of size them up, because frankly, there is a big kind of political strife brewing between the nobles and the workers of Wormbone. The nobles are, you know, doing what nobles do, collecting money just for existing, whereas, you know, the workers are the ones paying for their comfy existence through taxes and fees and tithes to the local government. So no one has really gotten involved with that yet, although they have started to see how that plays out, because it's broader than just the political scene. It also has to do with the religious scene. So there's a thing that it's not entirely clear to all of you yet, because I haven't laid all this background work in the GM's guide. I got to get back to building some stuff on that. I just got to find time. Fortunately, it's getting cool again, which is going to really open up my ability to do more work. There's this there's this religious strife in the city, and it's between the Church of Valanav, the god of law, and Astramari, the god of good. So the Astramari faith, although their senior member holds the council seat, the senior member of the clergy of Astramari is very old and kind of out of it, like doesn't really participate very much, has been known to fall asleep during council meetings, and frankly, usually just sides with the noble seat. So you have 3 seats on the council, right? The noble seat, the religious seat, or the god seat, and the worker seat. And the worker seat is pushing for better pay, better benefits, better, you know, more time off, all the sorts of things that workers want. The noble seat, they don't want anything to do with that, because they're also representing the merchant class. And the god seat usually serves as a tiebreaker, but in this case, the current holder of the god seat is kind of out of it and generally just sides with the noble seat. So you've got this kind of strife building, because then you've got the lesser, the like second in command of the second highest ranked priest of Astramari is genuinely a good person. That's Mother Yurla at the Foot of Mercy, and she is much more in line with the worker seat. But until the current head of the Astramari faith retires or passes away, her hands are tied. She does not get the seat until that happens. So meanwhile, at the same time, you have the Church of Valanav, who are they do not have a line to that god seat, but they are in bed with a group of fanatics called the Resolute Heart. A Resolute Heart is trying to get people to go back to being more strict in their faith. They believe that the gods have gone silent and grown distant, and the stars have gone dark in the sky because people have stopped worshiping the gods the right way. So there is this point where to get in with and this has happened in one group, to get into the records, the Valanav records, you have to kind of go and run errands with the priestess of Valanav. And the key here is that as long as one player at least convincingly pays lip service, you can get access. If all of the players are like, this is a bunch of nonsense, and back away, then it becomes much harder, because then you can't get into the records for Valanav, which makes it harder to learn about Wolfren's brother's book connection. There is another way to learn it, but it's a more circuitous route. So when you try and get access to the records at the Temple to Valanav, the law speaker's like, we don't just let anybody look at those. Those are our sacred texts. If you want, to get access, you have to prove your devotion to Valanav. So why don't you go with my priestess as she's going around doing her daily duties? And her daily duties, frankly, are pretty, well, they're in line with the Church of Law. Let's just say that. So the first one is going to the local soup kitchen and protecting her, or at least shielding her, while she preaches that the people here have lost their way and that their misfortune is due to their ungodliness, and basically kind of blaming the poor for being poor. It's not a good look. And that's how it starts. So, like, for my one group, two of the characters were, like, that was it. They were out. They were just like, yeah, I go and throw food with them. Right? They're getting food fight thrown at them. But the other three characters, one of them is, like, actually a worshiper of Valanav and is like, yeah, I mean, I don't agree with that, but we shouldn't be throwing food, right? And is trying to play this kind of middle road. I think the other two characters were kind of playing along just to make sure that they would get the records they needed. But from there, they go and track down the wandering shrine to Silara. Now, Silara is the chaotic deity, isn't a major power player here. Even though Silara has a lot of worshippers, they're not organized to get into politics. That's not what they do. And the shrine to Silara moves around all the time. And frankly, the Church of Valanav wants to drive it out of town. Whoever's moving it, whatever their faith they have there, the Church of Valanav, doesn't want them there because they don't like these uncontrolled, unpredictable folks. So, and yeah, I mean, there's a comment here in chat that it is hard to like the followers of Valanav intentionally, right? They are law. They're not good. Good isn't their edict. Law is their edict. Following the rules are their edict. That is how they believe that one gets closer to God. So, anyway, they're with her and they're trying to track down this shrine to Silara because she wants to take record of all those who are here praying or giving alms. And there are a bunch of gloamlings floating around, and you can, if one of the players wants to narc on them, you can, but that's the missing key that they need. They don't know that the gloamlings are the ones moving it around, because gloamlings, by and large, worship Silara. Not that they know that, because they live in their ivory temple and they don't really pay attention to it. And then the final thing is to go to the to the Foot of Mercy and deliver a letter from the law speaker to Mother Yurla at the Foot of Mercy. And mind you, this is the kind of down-to-earth kind of temple place where everything's made of wood, and it's patched, and it's worn, and the high priestess wears a patched garment because she doesn't want, to be wearing finery. All the money that goes into the alms box she uses to help feed and clothe the poor. This is actually a legitimately good person who is honestly just trying to do better by the people of Wormbone. And the letter that the Valanav priestess is delivering is one from the law speaker telling her that she must allow the Resolute Heart to come and preach during the upcoming Eventide ceremonies at the Foot of Mercy, because they contain the edicts of Astramari. Valanav agrees with those edicts, right? And it's this kind of, for them, it's this kind of political ploy to try and get their religious fanatics in front of the followers of Astramari. And Mother Yurla wants nothing to do with it. And the great part is the Valanav priestess asked the player characters to go inside and deliver the letter because she doesn't want to go in there. So this whole thing, right, is really just an object lesson in kind of moneyed, powerful privilege and how that's being wielded in town. So, I mean, there's a lot of kind of less than subtle connotations here and direct kind of setting up the players, right? So you've got, the Church of Astramari, sleeping figurehead, but is otherwise a good organization. You've got the Church of Valanav, which is kind of actively pushing religious dogma and doing so through kind of some fanatics called the Resolute Heart. And there is going to be an encounter at some point in time during this adventure with members of the Resolute Heart who are attempting to, forcefully bring religious law onto someone who broke an edict. So I think that's going to be a wandering encounter in this part. I'm going to write that and add it to the adventure. I've been trying to decide where I should put it. And now that I'm talking to all of you about it, I think I'm going to add it as a random encounter to this part of the adventure, where sometime during the Eventide celebration, they run into members of the Resolute Heart who are dragging someone away from a festival for not doing the proper prayers, and is trying to make an example of them. So, this whole thing is there to set up the kind of one of the major conflicts within Wormbone, which is, a conflict as old as money itself, which is, the conflict of the wealthy versus those who have to work. The conflict of power versus people. And I think that is something interesting to add. I think it speaks to, frankly, a lot of our real life situations. I do think your adventures in your world should echo those things. People with money do use it to make sure that they stay in money. And that oftentimes means, exploiting those who don't have power and money. And that is what's happening here. The major merchant families and noble families use their control of trade to make massive amounts of coin that they don't necessarily share down the line to all of the people involved. They skim a much larger percentage out of this. They pay people as little as they possibly can. It's frankly how the real world works too. So, I do think that is an interesting thing that is being built upon here. Again, none of this is the main focus of trying to find Wolfren's ring and dealing with the gaunts that are hunting you. Right? That's not the story here. Or sorry, that is the story of this part. All this other stuff is just setting up kind of texture and background for adventuring in Wormbone and dealing with the interesting things in Wormbone, right? Because this is an introductory adventure. The goal of it is to set up Wormbone and the region and make it interesting and kind of lay the groundwork for adventures in the future. It's coming along well, to be honest. I'm really happy with kind of how some of the layered lore is playing out. And, from here we go to the next step, which is kind of laying out lore for the entire region. Once we kind of get through that, then we bring it all home for one grand conclusion, and that's the end of this adventure. Then we move on to the next thing. So I am excited to see how this goes and how it plays out. I think the players are just starting to get into the second branch of this story, right? There's the one branch that is find the ring. There's the other branch that is deal with the gaunts that are trying to hunt you. And that part kicks off with a letter that gets delivered by a member of the Waysong Guild. And the Waysong Guild are like little couriers, local guides that run around the city. And one of these members comes up and gives the PCs a letter that says, hey, there are folks out there who would do you harm. You have taken the first step on this important journey. We want to take you further down this step. We are here to help. Go to the Black Thumb at noon tomorrow and ask for Aubade Inc. So they get this letter on the first day, asking them to come on the second day, so that would be the last day, the 28th of Octran, to go to the Black Thumb at noon and ask for Aubade Inc. Assuming that they do that, they then get to meet the Dawnbringers. Now, the Dawnbringers are this organization that was founded in part by Wolfren. And the Dawnbringers are trying to look into and understand the nature of the degradation of magic that has happened since Eventide. And they are trying to bring this to light. They're trying to uncover this mystery and understand what it means. Unfortunately, they lost one of their most powerful members when Wolfren disappeared. And now that apparently is not the case, they have interest in the PCs. So the leader of this group, the current leader of this group, Alipar Clifton, has asked the PCs to meet him. If they go there, he questions them carefully, trying to ascertain whether or not they are actually seekers of this truth. And if they are, he cautiously tells them, hey, listen, we know that there are some who would do us harm. We think they're getting closer to us. Okay, big secret time. I haven't told anybody this yet. Greyfawn Nimblebrow was one of their members. And the moment they realized that the tower was open, they sent Greyfawn to go inside. So Greyfawn got killed by the Gaunts, and that's how the Gaunts are now on Alipar Clifton's tail. And they're trying to bring the Dawnbringers down because they don't want anyone to learn about what happened during Eventide. So this is the first step in that chain. They meet Alipar Clifton. They don't really learn much, but it's kind of an introduction. Then they get attacked again and again. They get attacked twice. One of my groups is at the first ambush, actually. That's where their game concluded, was them going home from running errands with the Valanav, and on their way home they got ambushed by the folks that were hired by the Gaunts. So the Gaunts have hired some thugs through a local kind of illegal job board, and those thugs are about to jump the PCs. So that's in one of my sessions. The other session is like literally one encounter before that. So they're at the end of their day too. They just haven't quite gotten to the point where they're doing that. So that whole thing kicks off and then leads into Eventide, where they're attacked directly by Gaunts in the middle of the street. That leads to their sewer and the conclusion of part 2 of this adventure. So it is all coming together nicely. I am excited to see where it kind of all goes from here. But we're not quite there yet. We're almost there. I'm excited. I'm super excited. So, folks, I think that's about all I got here today. If anybody has any last minute questions, I'll probably take those. But otherwise, I'm going to wrap this up here in just a moment. What do we got going on here? I think our next stream will be a week from today. We just did a Secrets of Eventide on this past Saturday. Yeah. So the next one of those isn't until 2 weeks from today. If you missed that, I suggest you go back to watch it. So we'll be meeting back here in a week. Folks, between now and then, I'm pretty sure I will have the manuscript for part 1 of Wolfren's Fate in layout. And frankly, as soon as that is through layout, it will probably end up going out to all of you well before I deal with the printer proofs and putting it up for sale. All of you will obviously get it first. So we've got that coming. It's coming soon. Obviously, I'm going to have to push it through layout. That's going to take a bit. Laying out a 32-page adventure is going to take me a while. But I've got all my art assets ready. I'm just waiting to kind of layer them all together and create the adventure files. So, folks, let's see. I have a question. If the timeline crunches in both parties, and will you favor a? Will I? Oh, will I? Well, how will I deal with that? Basically, if I end up with a time crunch in both parties, how does that work out? Honestly, I think throughout Eventide, some of the shops and businesses can be open to allow the mystery to continue. There is another option as well, which is just the mystery part of it takes longer than Eventide by a day or two. That's not the end of the world. It's not quite as climactic as I'd like it to be. Ideally, I would like the players to understand where they think the ring is, toward the end of the Eventide celebration, but they're not going to want to leave town right during Eventide. So, in either case, the mystery is important, but the mystery isn't the grand finale to part 2. The grand finale to part 2 is dealing with the Gaunts and their sewer base. So I do think that is kind of the key. Do I have a contingency plans for a labor uprising started by the PCs? I'm going to have to make one because one of my players is definitely trying to go that route. I don't think it's something they can foment within 2 or 3 days, right? They need to build up a reputation first, and that reputation system is slow. It's not something you get done in a week. It can take months to get your reputation up to the point where you can make real change happen using the reputation system. So I guess I'm not too worried about my players getting to that too quickly. All right, folks, that's about all I got here today. I got another stream starting up here in just about a little over 10 minutes. So I want to make sure I've got time for that. I want to thank you all for tuning in here tonight. We had a good crowd, lots of good questions, lots of good comments. Folks, I want to thank you all for watching. Thank you all for your support. We're another month into this. I'm about to start ordering art for part 2, which is going to be another $2,000 worth of art, probably. It's making adventures is expensive. But I couldn't do this without all of your support. I really do. It means the world to me. So I want to thank you all for your support. I want to thank you all for watching, folks, and we will be back next week with more discussion about Eventide. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.